Hello, I'm David Leitner, and welcome to Part 5 of our look at Canon's Cinema EOS family of cameras. This section is about lenses, one of my favorite topics, because really, although we've been discussing cameras and workflow, it's the lenses that create the image in the first place. The camera can never make the image look any better than the lens created the image in the first place. Now, Canon offers almost a universe of lenses for the Cinema EOS cameras. The reason is all the EF lenses from DSLRs and SLRs work on these cinema cameras, as well as the new cinema lenses that Canon has created for 4K and beyond. Let's start with a look at the EF lens family. EF stands for Electro Focus, and it was introduced in 1987 to replace the earlier style lenses which required a mechanical linkage to the camera. EF stands for Electro Focus, which means that there are contacts on these lenses and the lenses are electronically controlled by the camera. They feed the camera information. Their full frame coverage, the basic EF lens mount is a 44mm flange focal distance, and it's a bayonet style. The lenses fit in the camera and they lock in like this. Now there's a second category of EF lenses that were introduced in 2003, and they're called EF-S. S stands for Small Image Circle, and they're designed for the smaller sensor cameras, APS-C. The APS-C sensor size is about the same as Super 35, so in my mind I see them as equivalent, which means that if a lens can cover Super 35, it can cover APS-C and vice versa. An example of an APS-C camera that you're probably familiar with is the Canon 7D. The C100, C300, and C500 are Super 35 size sensor cameras, but again, it's equivalent. Now there's a third EF family member called EF-M, which was introduced last year in 2012, and those lenses are specifically designed for mirrorless still cameras. Instead of a 44mm flange focal distance, they have a very shallow 18mm flange focal distance, which is about the same as the Sony E-mount and Micro Four Thirds. That is not appropriate to these cameras, and as a result, EF-M lenses cannot be used on Cinema EOS cameras. The flange focal distance is just too shallow. So EF and EF-S work great. Now in the case of the 1DC, which we've been talking about in previous sections, this is a full frame sensor camera, and I'm showing you the kit lens 24-105, which covers the full sensor. This camera can capture a window for Super 35, and therefore you can use EF-S lenses on this camera, but you have to remember to window down to Super 35 or the EF-S lens won't cover. Now, inscribed at the top of the barrel of most of these lenses are a number of letters, and they give you some insight into the many technologies that these lenses embody. E means EF mount, manual focus, full sensor coverage. If there's an F, EF, as we've been discussing, electro focus, that means that the lenses are electronically controlled in terms of autofocus and auto iris. EF-S, as we've also mentioned, means that it covers a smaller image circle, which is appropriate to APS-C and 35mm size sensors. If you find an L inscribed on the rim of the lens, that stands for luxury. Everyone believes that, and I don't know any different. But what it spells is top of the line. This is Canon's best build quality for SLR lenses. It means large aperture, the use of ultra-low dispersion glass on the inside to minimize chromatic aberration. You can always identify an L-series lens by the red band. The letter L is in red. All of these lenses, all of the Cine lenses, you'll see a red band on them. They're all L-series. This 25-104 kit lens has a red band. It's L-series. All of the rest of the lenses on this table from Canon are L-series, top of the line. If you see a CN-E, which is what these lenses are, CN stands for Cine, and -E stands for the fact that they have EF mounts on them. If they had a PL mount, it would be CN-P, P for PL. If you see an S on these lenses, that means Super 35 coverage. Now, IS stands for image stabilization, and that's found in EF lenses because it's electronically controlled. For instance, this 24-105, it has a little IS on the rim, and the image stabilization is built into the lens. So if I put this lens on a 1DC, or if I put this lens on a C500, I have image stabilization in both cases. It's the lens that delivers that. Now, if you see USM inscribed along the rim of the lens, that stands for Ultrasonic Motor. That's the motor that achieves the fast and quiet autofocus in EF lenses. And that's a Canon innovation. It's a round circular motor that fits inside this lens barrel. This 24-105 has USM on it. If you have a lens with STM, that stands for Stepper Motor Drive. That also achieves autofocus, but it achieves continuous autofocus, which of course is appropriate to shooting video. There are 3 STM lenses that I'm aware of. There's an EF-S 18 to 55 millimeter, and of course EF-S means it covers APS-C and Super 35. There's an EF-S 18 to 135 millimeter, and there's an EF 40 millimeter prime f2.8. 3 STM lenses that can achieve continuous autofocus. If you see a DO inscribed on the rim of the lens, these are not very common, but very impressive. DO stands for Diffractive Optics. It's a special multi-layer diffractive element. You can see it when you look in the lens. It looks a little bit like a Fresnel lens to the eye. It's a series of diffraction gratings, actually, to get technical. And what it does is it reverses chromatic aberration, which is a problem particularly in long lenses like telephotos. A DO lens from Canon will have a green band around the edge instead of a red band. I know of 2 of these lenses. There's an EF 70 to 300 and an EF 400 millimeter. Now, another technology found in Canon's EF family of lenses is tilt shift. If you find a TSE inscribed along the top of the lens, it's a tilt shift lens with an EF mount. Of course, you'll know it's a tilt shift lens because you sought it out, because this lens does some amazing things. For one thing, there are a couple of knobs along the side. If I move this knob right here, you'll see that the top of the lens swings back and forth. If I move this knob here, you'll see that the lens mount shifts back and forth. Now, obviously, this lens distorts. Now, what good is that? Well, an architect might use this to correct perspective. Let's say you were shooting a tall building and the perspective lines converge too sharply. Well, with a tilt shift lens, you can unconverge those lines a little bit. But you can have a lot of fun with these lenses because in tight circumstances, you can open up and shift the look of a tight space very easily. There are 4 tilt shift lenses that Canon makes, EF lenses. There's a 17 millimeter, which is what this one is. You can identify that because the front element looks like a bubble, pops out of the front. There's a 24 millimeter, a 45 millimeter, and there's even a 90 millimeter telephoto tilt shift lens. Now, Canon's EF lenses offer 3 different solutions for close-up photography. The first are macro lenses. Canon makes at least 5 EF macros that achieve 1-to-1 magnification, including this terrific 100 millimeter L-series macro. If you look on the barrel, it says IS for image stabilization, and it says USM for ultrasonic motor, and that means you have autofocus in a macro lens. The second solution for close-up is the use of extension tubes. Canon makes 2 different extension tubes for EF lenses, one for wide-angle lenses and one for 50 millimeters and up. And the way that works is you add the extension tube to your camera, and then you add the lens to the extension tube, and that adds a close-up capability to any Canon EF lens. I happen to have this 17 millimeter tilt shift lens. Imagine what you could do with that with a close-up capability. Now, thirdly, you can add diopters, and those are those thin lenses that you screw into the front of lenses to add close-up capability. Canon makes 4 diameters, 52 millimeter, 72 millimeter, 58 millimeter, and 77 millimeter, and they come in 2 series. There's one series that's meant for lenses from 30 millimeters to 135 millimeters. That's called the 250D series, and it has dual achromatic elements to kind of tamp down on chromatic aberration. These are very high quality diopters. And the second is a 500D series with a single achromatic element for lenses from 70 millimeters up to 300 millimeters. Now, there are third-party lenses made for Canon EF cameras, the EOS series of cameras that use the EF mount. There are too many to list here. It's a big market. But just to give you an example, we've just discussed tilt-shift lenses, and there are third-party tilt-shift lenses available at B&H that will fit these cameras. For instance, Samyang, a Korean firm, makes a 24 millimeter f3.5 tilt-shift lens. Sometimes it's called Rokinon. Those are Samyang and Rokinon are the same. There's a series from Schneider of tilt-shift lenses for EF mount, 28 millimeter, 50 millimeter, and 90 millimeter. So the point is, when you're using an EF mount Canon camera, a Cinema EOS camera, you have a lot of choices. In addition to Canon's EF lenses, Canon also makes cinema lenses. They've recently introduced a series of cine zooms and cine primes. Let's take a look at the cine primes first. The cine primes are EF mount only. They're L series, you can tell that from the red band. They're F as well, which means full frame coverage. So the cine primes work with the full sensor of the 1DC. Now, what makes these prime lenses cine to begin with? Well, they're entirely mechanical on the inside. There's gearing for the iris and gearing for focus, but there's no motor inside of this. It's completely manually operated. You'll notice at the back there's some electrical contacts, but that's just for reporting metadata to the camera, for instance, focal length and aperture metadata. Now, the focus ring turns a whopping 300 degrees. That's something that we use in cinema for very fine-grained focus. On the inside, the lens has an 11-blade round iris for circular highlights. It turns very smoothly. There are no detents, of course. You'll notice that the housing of these two lenses is exactly the same, although one's an 85 and one's a 24. That's because in cinema, we're often taking lenses off the camera and putting them back on quickly, and we need these lenses to be the same size to drop into, say, the follow focus mechanism in the same way very quickly. These have the same 114 millimeter outer diameter. They're both 4 inches in length. They have the same 105 millimeter inner thread for use of the same size filters. There are 6 focal lengths. I've just got 2 of them here. There's a 14 millimeter, a 24 millimeter, a 35, a 50, an 85, and a 135 millimeter. A complete suite of 6 cine primes. Now let's look at the cine zooms. Well, they come in EF mount and PL mount. The mount can be changed, although I think it takes a technician to do that, but just keep in mind that you can have them in both EF and PL mount. They're L series. You see the red band along the bottom of each of these. They're S for Super 35. These do not cover full frame, Super 35. They have the same 300-degree focus rotation as the primes. They have the same 11-blade iris as the primes. What else makes these zooms cine? Well, they don't trombone. When you zoom, you don't see the size of the lens changing. The size of the lens remains the same. There's little, if any, ramping. That's loss of aperture when you zoom these lenses. These are cine lenses. They're not like SLR lenses where when you get to the long end, suddenly you lose light. There are 2 types of cine zooms from Canon. There are compact zooms and there are these full-size zooms, and let me talk about that for a minute. The compact zooms, they have the same 114 millimeter diameter as the primes do. That facilitates the use of the same size matte box, a lot of the same size follow focus, etc. These 2 compact cine zooms each weigh 4.8 pounds. This is a 15.5 to 47, and this is a 30 to 105. They're both T28. Now, Canon makes two top-end cine zooms that were designed for beyond 4K resolution. Here is a 30 to 300, and next to me on the C500 is a 14.5 to 60. These are built to such high specifications that you can almost consider them to be variable prime lenses. But they're pretty fast lenses. They're L lenses, L series, and they're S. As I mentioned earlier, their coverage is Super 35. Now, what sets Canon 4K cinema lenses apart from EF lenses designed for DSLRs? What makes these lenses different from these lenses? In every case, larger glass, utmost mechanical precision. You need perfect opto mechanical centering for cine work, especially for zooms this large. You need wide rotation angles for focus and zoom. You need really sturdy build quality. These things are solid. There's no plastic in a cine zoom. You need a viscous, smooth focus. Perfectly smooth focus, because you're doing this manually and you're doing it all the time, and you have to hit focus marks. In addition to its universe of EF mount lenses and its cinema lenses, with the PL mount version of the C500 and C300, Canon opens the door to a parallel universe of PL mount cine lenses used throughout motion picture production. I have here a 40mm Cooke Mini S4. This just symbolizes all of the primes from Cooke and Zeiss, Schneider, zooms from Angenieux and Fujinon in PL mount that are used daily in cinematography, which now are available to the C300 and C500. So, that concludes our 5-part series, a closer look at Canon's Cinema EOS family of cameras. Thank you for watching.
Whether you're a hobbyist or a professional, B&H has the answers to your questions. Experience a world of technology at our New York City Superstore. Connect with us online or give us a call. Our staff of experts is happy to help.